everyone. This is a continuation of previous week's BAS webinar on photo processing, astrophoto processing in Adobe Camera Raw. So in the previous session, last week on Sunday, we had discussed several things, how to process astrophotos. And there were a few things left out. So let me start my presentation. So last week we had checked out what is ACR. ACR stands for Adobe Camera Raw, and where can you download the software installable, and what cameras and lenses are supported. And then we had discussed a little bit about what is a RAW file and DNG file and sidecar file, and then we had gone on to process some photographs. Some of the photographs were sent by participants and other people. We have received, I have received several more images. So first of all, let me post the link for last week's webinar, which is available on YouTube in BAS channel. Let me copy this link in the chat window. So as usual, please copy this link if you are interested in watching this previous week webinars, because as soon as this webinar ends, these whatever I have copied in the chat window will go away. So I just posted the link for last week's webinar. Let me start with the one of the photos that I've received from Akarsh. So the photo is over here, and I'm looking at the photograph in Adobe Bridge. So Adobe Bridge is an image browsing software from Adobe, and whatever changes that you apply on any raw file will reflect over here. So at the moment, there are no changes applied to this image. And if I select the image and double click, or alternatively click on the enter key on the keyboard, the image opens in Adobe Photoshop, and automatically it opens in, since it is a raw file, it opens in Camera Raw. On my computer at the moment, I have Camera Raw 10.2 installed. Now, as I said in the last week's webinar, couple of things that I said was I would like to keep this webinar fully interactive. That means you are free to unmute yourself at any time, and you can ask me anything, any question. You can also give me suggestion and some other alternate ways. So I would like to keep it very interactive as it was last week. Also, on my screen, I can watch the icons and text in very clearly, but it may not be transmitting properly to your screen. So if you cannot understand any icon or cannot see any text that I'm explaining, please feel free to ask, and I will clarify immediately. So over here, I'm currently working in Camera Raw 10.2, and this is a image sent by Akarsh. And let's see what we can do with this image. Akarsh, since you are here, would you like to say something about this image? Where was it shot?
Sure. Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So this image was shot in a location called a Recapture Pocket in Utah. It's a very weird name for a place. But in the USA, you might know that Utah and Arizona have a lot of these sandstone formations. And so I really like them, and I keep visiting that region. And these kinds of rock formations are normally called hoodoos. So I was at this place, and it had become night, and I had just purchased a new tripod and started taking my tripod on my hikes. This wasn't really a hike; it was very short walk from my car, so I think there was moon, but right around this time, twilight was fading and Orion was rising. So I saw the opportunity and I said, let me light paint a little bit of the hoodoos on the front and see if I can capture Orion. And I mean, as you can see, the lens has a lot of chromatic aberration. It's a Canon zoom lens, and I tried processing it myself, and then I didn't get very far. So I wanted to see what Ajay will do.
Okay, so in this image, Orion is rising. It's quite large on the horizon, and you can see plenty of stars, the Orion shield, and the foreground is quite a bit lighted. So we want to reduce that. So let's see what we can do with this image. So first of all, I want to go to the lens correction tab in Adobe Camera Raw and remove the chromatic aberration, and I want to invoke the profile correction in this image. So the lens profile appears automatically, and the model which says over here is Canon EF 17 to 40 mm f4. So it takes the thing automatically, Adobe Camera Raw. And if I click it off and on, you will see that some of the vignetting and distortion is removed. If you want to see if any chromatic aberration is present at the corners of the image, you will have to go 100%, or maybe even go 200%. And now I'm pressing spacebar on my keyboard, and the icon turns to hand tool, and I'm going in the corner and checking if there's any chromatic aberration present in the image. So I'm clicking this remove chromatic aberration radio button on and off, and I see that there is not much chromatic aberration present in this image. There's just a slight bit of magenta over here, but it's not at all a problem. So double clicking on the hand tool will bring up the fit in window. So what would you like to do with this image? First of all, I see that the vignetting hasn't removed all the darkening in the corners as much as I would like. So in the same lens correction tab, there is one profile selection, and then there is a sub tab of manual. So over here you have the distortion remover. On the left is barrel distortion, and on the right is pincushion distortion. So I can show it to you by moving this slider. You can see that the center portion is getting enlarged, and in this, if I move towards pincushion distortion, the center portion is getting reduced. So this was just a method of showing you the distortion correction. I will get back to I will reset it. Then in this tab, the second portion is defringe, which will remove the chromatic aberration present in the stars. This is very useful in some lenses. So you have two parts of this defringe. You have the purple amount and the green amount. So when you move the slider for purple amount, the purple, if there are any stars which have purple tinge, or you could call it purple fringe, it will get removed, and the corners are affected more. So the effect will be more in the corners of the image. And similarly, you can increase the green amount, and the green fringe, if it is present, will be removed. You can also change the color selection of what color. If there's some blue fringe, you can remove that by shifting this color palette. Okay, at the moment I am interested in removing the vignetting from the corners of the image. So I will move this vignetting slider towards the right just a little bit, and here I'm going to exaggerate it for the moment to show you what the effect is. So this is not intended, but just to show you. You can see that the extreme corners of the image are getting brightened, which is not a good idea. But if you want a smooth transition, you can move the slider, which is called midpoint, towards the left, and the vignetting will move towards the center, as you can see over here. But obviously, I'm not going to move the vignetting slider to 100. I just want to move it to about 20 to 25, something like that, and midpoint to 20. So even this is looking a little more, so I'm going to reduce it even further and slider to. So this is just a slight effect that I wanted in the vignetting. The corners should be a little more pronounced. Now I'm going to go to the detail tab, and detail tab, when you're working in detail tab, you should increase the view to 100%. And I see that there is not much noise in this image. It's kind of good, but still I would just, since we keep on doing some processes and noise gets increased, I'm going to reduce the noise just by 30, a minimum amount. And even then you can see that the rocks are getting a little bit of painted blurry look. So maybe I'll just reduce it to 20. Now to the main basic tab, and what I want to do is reduce the highlights in the foreground, and I'm going to go now. This light which has been shining is too pointed. It's too bright. This cannot be reduced. Even by going highlights to -90 and whites to -90, so over here, what is happening over here is that still the area is too bright. So maybe the focus of this light is totally on the shrubs over here. So let's see if we can shift the focus of this image by increasing the shadows. As well as the blacks. So increasing the shadows and the blacks has brought out many stars in the image. Now, one very important thing I forgot to mention in the previous week, last Sunday, is when you are moving the sliders in Adobe Camera Raw, you can press the Alt key. Let me demonstrate the highlights slider. Now I'm pressing the Alt key on my keyboard and moving the highlight slider. So everything has turned black. And now you will see that slowly some parts of the image will turn white. Okay. So I will now move the white slider also. And whatever areas that are appearing are saturated now. You will see that all these areas are saturated. So what is the purpose of this Alt key? The purpose of pressing the Alt key and moving a slider is to check whether what areas are getting overexposed or not. Now I will bring this white back to -90 as well as highlights to -90 and show you the same effect in shadows also. So if I move this slider and now on my keyboard I have pressed the Alt key, and you will see that everything is white, and I will also move the black slider, and you will see now that some areas are appearing and these areas are now totally black. So if I leave, all these areas have totally become black. So this pressing the Alt key tells you that this is the limit. Like if you move the slider below this limit, this area will be totally black, devoid of any detail. So now the shadows, rather the zero brightness areas are increasing as I move the black slider leftward. So this is the benefit of using Alt key. Okay, now I'm going to move this image back to where I was, and we want to increase the focus on the sky area. The focus over here has been shifted from the foreground to this grass to the side areas, as well as the person who has moved a little bit, and also the stars have started to appear. But still, the stars are not prominent. Maybe we'd like to make the sky, night sky, more prominent. What can be done? I'm going to go to the Detail tab and discuss sharpening. This portion, which is the just above noise reduction, this is called sharpening. And over here, there are 4 sliders. The amount of sharpening is right on top, then the radius of sharpening, then detail, and finally masking. So I'm going to use the masking slider, but I'm going to press the Alt key and move the masking slider. So what will it do? So at the moment, if I apply any amount of sharpening, it will be applied to the entire image. So let's see again. I have pressed the Alt key on my keyboard, and I'm going to move the masking slider. And the entire image is white, which means that if I apply any sharpening, it will be applied to the entire image. Now I am moving the masking slider towards the right, and you will see that the white areas are getting reduced. And now you see that only the stars will get some sharpening. And now you see that only the detail in the rocks and the stars will get sharpening. So I am moving the masking slider, and now the masking slider is at 100%, and you will see that very little area of the image will get any sharpening if I choose to apply it. So in this particular case, I'm going to move the masking slider to about 80, and now I'm going to apply the sharpening. So this sharpening will be applied only to stars and these areas in the rocks which have these cracks and crevasses. So let's see. The amount of sharpening that I want to apply is about 100, and the radius, the pixels, let me go to 3, and you will notice actually on my screen I can see the sharpening very nicely, but this effect of sharpening may not transmit to you over this webinar because the screen resolution being transmitted may not be optimum. But what I can see over here, that by applying 100% sharpening and a radius of 3, I have increased the brightness of the stars. So let's see again over here. I'm double clicking on the lens tool, and maybe I will go a little bit even more. And over here, I'm going to change the amount of sharpening from 100 to 25, and you will see that the stars have blurred a little bit. And now I'm going to change the amount of sharpening from 25 to 150. Just a little bit of exaggeration to show you the change that is happening. What is happening is that the stars are getting sharpened and brighter. So again, so here is the overall image, and the focus has been shifted slightly from the foreground and the grass to the background and the night sky. So I hope I was able to explain properly. Any feedback and any more advice, comments to this process?
Hi, Ajay. Since we talked about the light being too hard, is it not possible to soften that with brush, like the exposure brush, or to take a brush and just brush that area and reduce its exposure or something like that?
Yes, Akarsh. There are 2 methods, like you said, the adjustment brush, and you also have the radial filter.
Right.
So let me try the radial filter first, and later I will try the adjustment brush. So here is the radial filter, and I'm going to click on it. And the method of making a radial filter, I am clicking on I'm double clicking on all these sliders so that they are reset. Okay, so the way that you uh, draw a radial filter is from the center and outwards, and you can make a oval, vertical oval, or a horizontal oval. If you press the shift key on the keyboard, it will be constrained to a perfect circle. So over here, how do we want to draw this? That's the important question now. How do we want to draw this radial filter so that it takes care of the foreground brightness but does not reduce the sky? So what is happening over here is that the Orion constellation is very close to this bright part. So how do we want to make the radial filter? So let's see if this works, because yeah, now the brightest portion is inside, but still this bright part is not inside. So let's see if I reduce the exposure a little bit and highlight just a little bit. If you overdo it, the effect will be easily seen. Now the problem over here in this image is that Orion is very close to the brightest portion of the image over here also. So if we start to make any changes, the sky is also getting affected. So I'm just showing you a method. It's not ideal, and I'm sharing my problems that I'm facing with this image. So over here, you're getting some layers. This is a dark portion. So these are the problems that I'm facing in reducing the highlights. So I was not able to use the radial filter in this case at all. But let me over here show you, if I want to engage the radial filter to this particular image, let me delete this to this particular part of the image, what will I do? So I will start from the middle. The problem that I'm facing is that the center of the radial filter gets 100% treatment, while the edge of the radial filter gets 0% treatment. So I am not able to have a sharp differentiation between the sky and the, that's my problem over here. So I'm going to have to make another radial filter, but it's not ideal. Okay, I'm going to delete these radial filters and work with adjustment brush. So adjustment brush is over here, and again you can see that there is a black circle and there is a white dotted circle. So inside the black circle, you will get 100% treatment, whatever you do. And in the transition zone from the black solid circle to outwards to the white dotted circle, you will get a gradual reduction of whatever you do. So let's see. I have reset all these sliders, and I want to reduce the highlights and exposure just a little bit, and as well as the whites. Now I'm coming on the image with the adjustment brush, and I want to reduce the size of the brush. So I'm pressing the square brackets on my keyboard, square brackets which are just next to the letter P, Papa. So this is the left side square bracket, and this is the right side square bracket. So as you can see that this is working far better than a radial brush. So Akarsh, does this answer your question?
Yes, definitely it does. Thank you. That's a phenomenal transformation. Uh, I wanted to ask you one more question on this. If you were to recompose this image and you had the opportunity to retake it, how would you change the composition and capture process?
The composition, I don't know what was there in the image around you, but
Mhm.
I would have gone a little wider. But the
Mhm.
main problem with this image is that the light is too bright, it's too sharp. Uh, and I know that you want to create the effect of the person having a headlight on his head,
Mhm.
of course.
Mhm.
But what is happening is that the camera and the light are in the same direction,
Right.
and it's extremely bright. So the light should have been far away,
Mhm.
diffused, and less intense.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
So if the light is coming from the same angle as the camera, the the landscape appears flat. This is a striking difference which cannot be made to understand in words. But if the light was coming from a little far away on the left of the person, it would
Mhm.
have changed. Let me show you a little example. Do you see the? Can you see that there is a
Yeah,
gap over
there's
here?
shadow. Right.
So this part of the image is not flat
Right.
because the light is coming at an angle, and there's a play of shadow and brightness. But look at
Absolutely.
this part of the stone, which is absolutely flat, although the stone is not at all flat. You know that. So
Yes.
if the light would have shifted from here to far away and diffused, and so that's my comment for this.
Okay, thank you. In fact, I had some exposures with side lighting, but I somehow chose this one because I think even the side lighting was very hard. It's very weird to have a very hard light on against the nightscape, I feel so. But yeah, that's a good point. I have to have a diffused light, and thank you for that feedback.
The color of the light is very good. It's white light. Sometimes you have a light which is very yellow and all that. So the color is very good. Uh, Sometimes I use, if I want, there is an app on my phone which can give a screen of any particular color that you want, RGB colors. So that's an idea, just an idea. So that light, which is coming from the screen of your smartphone, is quite enough to light up such areas. And you can place it on the side, put on the light, and then shoot your photo.
Thank you, Ajay.
Okay, I have a couple of things lined up today. I want to discuss time lapse processing in Adobe Camera Raw. So the time lapse processing comes later in my plan for this webinar, but I'm going to start the processing now, and it takes a while to process, and then I will come back to it. So let me change my sharing option. Just a second, please. Stop presenting and present again a Chrome tab. So here is a time lapse, and I will show you how to process this in Adobe Camera Raw. So let me show you the individual frames that have gone into making this time lapse. Okay, here are the images which were shot in the evening. And this is just one segment of the entire time lapse that I showed you. So you can see that it is a holy grail. That means the imaging had started in the evening, and then the sun had set and the stars had appeared. So for this, this transition, I am going to use a software called LR Time Lapse. This software LR Time Lapse works heavily is in combination with Adobe Camera Raw, either in Lightroom or Photoshop. So I've started this software and I have navigated to the particular folder where the raw files of this particular holy grail are there, and you can see that the software LR Time Lapse is loading the luminance values of each of the frame. So you can see over here that in the evening the light went down that drastically, and suddenly when the sun had set, I had changed the exposure. So the brightness has suddenly increased, and thereafter it had gone in a linear fashion. So this blue graph is depicting the brightness value of each of this frame. So here is a process. First of all, I have to make the keyframes. So how many keyframes are being suggested by the software itself, LR Time Lapse? So you can see that the keyframe over here is starting from 0 to 20. And the software itself has suggested 6 keyframes, and the number over here is 6. And you can see that the first keyframe is the first frame of this sequence, and the last one, and in between at equal distances you have a total of 6 keyframes. So what I will do is save the keyframes and go to Bridge software, and you can see that there are 4 stars over here. So it means that the Lightroom software has designated this as a keyframe because there are 4 stars and the next image does not have any stars. So I can go and filter, show 4 or more stars, and only those images will be visible which have 4 stars. So you can see that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 images. So these are the 6 keyframes that were designated by the LR Time Lapse. And I'm going to select all these 6 images and press enter on my key, or alternatively you could just double click and they will all open in Adobe Camera Raw in Photoshop. So this is a work of Adobe Camera Raw which comes into play immediately. So these are the 6 keyframes on the left side, and you can see the transition. So at the moment, only one image, one raw image is selected, and I'm going to select all the images, all 6 images. There are some changes which are to be made to all the frames, and there are some changes to be made to individual frames. So let me start in Adobe Camera Raw to make changes which are applicable to all the frames. So what are those changes? Those changes are obviously in the lens profile, which I'm going to select to remove vignetting. And when I do the enable profile collection, the lens does not appear because it was a manual lens of Rokinon. So I'm going to go and select the Rokinon brand over here. And by default, the Rokinon 14mm is selected but my lens, the particular lens that I used was not 14mm, it was 35mm. So the applicable lens profile distortion and vignetting is applied according to that lens. And then what I'll do is go to this effects tab and universally apply a little bit dehaze of 30 value. And then I will go to the detail tab and apply a noise reduction of 30 as well as a color noise reduction of 50 in all the frames. Now I will go to the basic tab and increase the vibrance by about 20 and clarity by about 30. And what change do I want to make in subsequent frames? So let's see. These are universal changes which I have already applied, and now I want to make changes in individual frames. So let's see over here, the first one. From the first one to the last one, you will see a change. The first one, the houses have no light. These are all darks and shadows. But in the last frame, the lights have come on in the society in which I live, and the houses are all bright. So over here in the first and the second image, I would like to increase the shadows so that some little resemblance of the houses is there, and even blacks. And in the next frames where the houses are brightly lit, I'm going to reduce the highlights. Maybe in these 4 frames, I will have a gradient filter also. Now LR Time Lapse by default applies 4 gradient filter, which I can use to reduce the highlights in the lower portion of the image. So these are the changes that I have made in Adobe Camera Raw. And what do I do next? Just a little bit over here more. Oh, I see that the exposure hasn't been reduced over here. So I have to select all these images first again and select this particular gradient filter and reduce the exposure. And I think I have to do it individually. Okay. The gradient filter, reduce the exposure, and the last image, gradient, and reduce the exposure. So here we are, and I will shuffle through the images to see the effect. Okay, over here also I need to increase these shadows so that the, just a second, I made a mistake. So I need to increase these shadows a little bit more. Maybe I can use the gradient filter over here also to increase the exposure on the houses. So now I'm going to just run through the keyframes to see the effect. All right. So I am done with my changes in Adobe Camera Raw. And what I'm going to do is just press done. Nothing to be done. And go back to LR Time Lapse and reload the sidecar files that has been created along with the raw files. So as soon as I press reload, you will see that there are some changes, and next I'm going to press on the auto transition, and all the changes that have been made in the keyframes will be symmetrically and applied to all the intermediate frames. So you can see all these curves that have appeared, and they have been applied in successive images as a sort of gradual increase or decrease, whatever the case may be. And now I'm going to save this transitions. And next, work on the visual previews in LR Time Lapse by pressing this key. So this creating the visual preview will take some time, and meanwhile I can get back to my next image, and I would like to take up this image sent by Suresh. So here I am in Adobe Bridge and selecting this particular file sent by Suresh, and double clicking on it will open in Adobe Camera Raw. Okay, before I start processing this particular image, are there any comments or questions? Okay, I will get on with this image. This particular image has been shot in Adobe Bridge. I can see the metadata. It has been shot with a f4 lens and at an ISO of 1600 and an exposure of 25 seconds. Is Suresh present today in the webinar?
Ajay, I don't think he is.
Okay, so I will continue.
So to give some background,
All right,
so this image was taken in Coorg, I believe.
Okay, okay. So the problem with this image is that it has been shot with a lens which is f4. Now, for single exposure photography, f4 is considered very slow. You should be aiming for lenses such as f1.2 or 1.7. Of course, lenses like f1.2 are really expensive, but if you come down to 1.7 or even f2, the price becomes reasonable. So I will explain the problems in this particular image. Those are solely because the f ratio is very slow, f4. So in this image, what all would you like to see is basically enable the profile correction, and the lens that is appearing in automatically is Canon 200 mm. I don't think this is the correct lens that was used. I think it is a wide angle lens. So if the correct lens is not getting registered, you would rather go for manual vignetting removal. And then proceed to the detail tab. Maybe we'll come to detail tab a little later to reduce the noise reduction when we have enhanced the image a little bit. So let's go to the basic tab and increase the exposure. So now you can see that there's a lot of noise that has appeared in the image. And the sole reason for that noise is the slowness of the lens, as well as maybe the camera also has some inherent noise. But if the lens would have been faster, a shorter exposure would have produced less noise. So I'm going to go to the detail tab and reduce the noise. Usually I don't go to 50, but in this case, noise is so much that I'm going to go to 50. And the next thing that you see is the image is extremely red. So I'm going to use the automatic white balance in the basic tab. Right on top, you have the white balance, and there's a menu item for auto, which does not solve the problem. The next thing that I'm going to use is the white balance tool, which is over here in the toolbar, and select this and click on a dark portion, which is also not working because it gives a lot of green tinge to the image. And clicking on the various other parts of the image also is not working. So I'm going to go and use the sliders to remove the white balance and maybe uh, try to get a gray sky. Okay, in this image, the next thing that would be sought after is to reduce the highlights, because the tent over here is getting a lot of light. And since we want to bring out the more of Milky Way, the shadows would have to be increased as well as the blacks. So, but I'm afraid that even whatever I do is not working out nicely in this particular image. So what could be done while shooting the image was to use a faster lens. That would have solved many of these photographs problems. Any other suggestions regarding this image?
I would try to apply some perspective correction to see if we can straighten some of the lines and make the baseline somewhat flatter, right? The landscape.
Right. You can see over here that this pillar is vertical, but it does not. Obviously, this pillar is vertical in reality, but it doesn't appear vertical in the image. Basically, because I think the photographer wanted to incorporate more of the Milky Way in the image. Because if the camera would have been a little tilted, the Milky Way would have been reduced. So there are actually no lines for the auto correction to work in this case. So actually, I'm not understanding what change you want to make over here. So can you explain a little bit more, please?
No, I was just going to say, Ajay, if we could try and make it flat or like make the landscapes erect, but I realize that might not always be possible. So
Yeah. So this tool, straightening tool, will probably work like this.
that's a lot better. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, it has made the photo look different altogether. So
Right.
that's a nice suggestion. Yeah, the vertical is looking vertical now. Any other suggestion regarding this photograph?
Hi Ajay. I had a question regarding this. So, like, what if you use the adjustment brush on the Milky Way and kind of enhance it, and leave the sky as it is, and but like just enhance the Milky Way features, the dust lanes? Is it going to be a good idea?
According to me, absolutely not. I only prefer global changes, and I really don't like to make enhancement procedures. But I can tell you what to do. So you have the adjustment brush over here. You click on it, and what change would you like to make? So maybe increase the exposure, and the highlight, and then okay, this is the procedure, but let me tell you, it works far better in Adobe Photoshop, because what is happening over here is that I have increased the exposure to 0.95 and taken the brush and applied over it, and 100% adjustment is applied. Again, I say 100% adjustment is applied. But now in Photoshop, if I open this image in Photoshop, let me get this back to where it was and open the image in Photoshop. And the same effect, if I want to apply in Photoshop, so let's see what I want to do. So if I do Control M on the keyboard, the curves window will open, and I will control click on the Milky Way, and this is the brightness of the Milky Way, and I'm going to increase the brightness of this particular point, and so this is the effect that I want, but I don't want this effect on the lower part. So what I will do is go in the history panel, and you can see that there are two items in the history panel. One is open the image, and the second one is curves. So I will click on this history button and step back by one history effect over here, and then over here I will take the history brush. And since in Adobe Camera Raw I was able to apply the brush in 100% only, so let me show you what I can do over here is apply the opacity of this brush. I can reduce the opacity of this brush to any percentage that I want. So I'm going to use 30% and use a very soft brush, hardness of which is really low, and then apply it very gently. So only 30% effect is being applied in one drag. So if I want to apply more 30%, I can drag it once more. So now the effect is 60%. And now if I go again, it will be slowly increasing. So this particular thing that you wanted is much more controllable in Photoshop itself than Adobe Camera Raw. Does that answer your question? Who was speaking?
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, Avinash. Yeah, I think that solves. Yeah, that looks better.
Okay. But to tell you the truth, I am against. I usually prefer global changes. That's my preference.
So I have one more question on this. So
could you speak a little louder, please?
Yeah, I can speak a little louder. So
thank you.
Yeah, so the house, right? The tiles on that, they are not in focus. Is it a problem with the image, or I thought if that is more in focus, I think the view would be much better.
That's right. The tiles on the house are not in focus, but how can they be? Because the camera was focused at infinity, and the house is not at infinity. This is a common problem. This is a common problem with the astrophotography, landscape astrophotography. If there's something very close to the camera, it won't be in focus. There are several solutions to it. Sometimes I use a fisheye lens. A fisheye lens has infinity focus very close to the lens, even 10 centimeters away from the lens, it's considered infinity. So fisheye lens can be used. Second solution to this problem is many photographers use it, even Tuan photographers use it, is called focus stacking. And you click different photographs, the camera is stationary, and one is aimed at the sky with infinity focus, and the other is another image is taken which is very close focused at close object, and then they are stacked together, which is called focus stacking.
Okay. Yeah, got that. So my only confusion was that the tiles on the roof are not in focus, but a wall adjacent to it, probably at the same level, it seems to be in focus. But I think that has got more light than the tiles on the roof.
Actually,
You see on the
let's see.
left in the middle, right? I think the supporting angular column, not that one on the left. Yeah, and just above that.
This one?
Yeah, this one. This one seems to be having more focus. And why is these tiles are all?
Actually, if you see carefully, nothing is in focus.
Okay. It's aligned. Yeah. Okay.
Are you able to see? This is a problem of the image not being on your computer. It's a transmission problem that you probably are experiencing.
Oh, okay. Yeah. This all doesn't look all blotchy for me here.
Does that answer your question, please?
Yes. Sure. Right. Thank you.
Okay, next, I would like to take up the spectacular image sent by. Okay, let me check on the LR time lapse, what is happening over there. Okay, the visual preview is 72% done. So we will come back to this after we have done a photograph sent by Dorje. So you all must have seen the spectacular photograph shot by Dorje and his friends at Hanle. So I requested him to send a few raw files, and the photograph that he has published on Facebook and other social media is a combination. So here are how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9 raw images, and I will show you the last image, which is actually the comet has set behind the observatory. So the photograph that he has published is a combination, is a stack of all these images and then recombined with a static photo of the observatory over here. So I'm going to work on this particular one image in Adobe Camera Raw. So double clicking in Adobe Bridge brings up the photograph in Adobe Camera Raw. And let me go back to the Bridge software. And you can see that the exposure is 28 seconds at an ISO of 3200. And F ratio is not given over here, probably because he was using a Rokinon lens, which is manual. So we don't know what the F ratio that was being used. So let's see what we can do to this particular image. You can see that it's a spectacular image, lots of stars and all pinpoint, and the comet is the coma of the comet. The nucleus of the comet is in fact overexposed. So let me start on this image by first going to the lens correction tab, and since we don't know the particular lens that was used, I'm going to go with the manual vignetting removal and just go to about 35 or 40 and reduce the midpoint to 20 so that the corners are a little bit. And I'm going to go to 100% and go to the corner of the image to see if there's any chromatic aberration present. So to the other corner, and over here I'm going to switch off the warning. As you can see that the middle of the stars is getting red color because this is a warning for the overexposed part. So you can see in the corners, maybe I will increase it to 200% so that everybody can see this image. There is no chromatic aberration at all in the image, so we are good. So then we go to the basic tab and increase the exposure. And decrease the highlights. Now, what is happening over here is when you decrease the highlights, of course, the coma portion is getting decreased, but the entire comet is also getting reduced in brightness. So we will not overdo it. So just going to about -40 or so. So let the coma and the nucleus be overexposed. So it does not matter. And increasing the clarity will work like a local contrast. And I also want to change the white balance because there's a lot of green visible in the background. So I'm going to just fine tune it using these sliders. And finally, I will go to the detail tab to decrease the noise, which is quite apparent. So this single image in working in Adobe Camera Raw has produced a spectacular result. Even stacking the image which Dorje has stacked and got it, this result is comparable to a single image processed in Adobe Camera Raw. I will go further a little bit, just 2 or 3 more steps I would like to do with this particular image and open it up in Photoshop. And majorly, I would like to show 2 effects in this. One is a filter called HLVG, which stands for Hasta la Vista Green. Hasta la Vista means bye-bye green. And this is a funny name given to, deliberately funny name given to removing green from this image. And this filter is available as a plugin for Photoshop and it can be downloaded. The filter has been made by Rogelio Bernal Andreu and it's available for free. And it says over here HLVG is based on PixInsight's SCNR tool. And it says on top, the text says HLVG removes unwanted green noise from an image. Usually a strong amount is recommended, but feel free to experiment with medium and weak amounts. So I'm going to use the strong button over here and press OK, and it immediately removes the green noise. But you're going to argue that the comet was green. Comets are usually green. So you may not want to use the strong filter, and you may want to get back and let's see the effect. So I have pressed Ctrl Z on my keyboard and eliminated that last. So I'm going to go to Deep Sky Colors and HLVG again and try using a medium filter. So over here you can see that the green color hasn't gone. This is one step that I wanted, one filter that I wanted to show you, HLVG, Hasta la Vista Green. The other filter that I want to show you is called block saturation method. Block saturation method is named after Adam Block. And in this particular image, the tail which is on the left side, the comet tail which is on the left side is distinctly blue in color. And I would like to bring out that color. So what do? This is the entire image and I press Ctrl A on my keyboard so that everything is selected, all of the image is selected, and now I will press Ctrl C on my keyboard to copy the entire image, and then press Ctrl V to paste the image, but 3 times. So over here in the layers panel, you see that 3 different layers have appeared, which are the exact copies of the background. The top layer, I'm going to change the blending mode to luminosity. The middle layer, I'm going to change the blending mode to soft light. And then select these 3 layers and merge them together. And if I click this layer on and off, you will see slight color improvement in this image. Now, this color improvement will probably not at all be visible to you because it's happening on a webinar. So to enhance this even more, what I will do is again apply the block saturation method, Control A and Control C. So this layer is now copied, and I will press Control V 3 times to paste it. And the top layer, I will change the blending mode to luminosity. The middle layer, I will change the blending mode to soft light, and then merge these 3 layers together. So click off the middle layer. So to bring out the effect even more, so that everybody can see it very clearly, I am going to repeat this process again one more time. So Control A and Control C to copy this layer, the final top layer, and Control V 3 times to paste it. For the top layer, blending mode to luminosity, middle layer, blending mode to soft light, and then merge these 3 layers. And probably now the effect would be very apparent. So if I click off this layer, you can see that the blue tinge is coming up nicely in the this secondary comet tail, as well as you will see that the star colors have increased nicely. So you can see that this particular star is appearing much more bluer, and this particular star is appearing over here is appearing orangish and reddish. So here is original image, before and after. Before and after. So congratulations to Dorje, who has clicked this image over the Indian Astronomical Observatory. And over here, I would like to show this last image. If I increase the exposure, you can see that it has been clicked over the IAO. And since the image was being clicked using a tracker, the stars are pinpoint, but the Earth has moved. Any questions or comments on this particular image? Let me go back to the LR time lapse, and you can see that the visual preview has completed, and now I can play this sequence. So you can see over here that there's a lot of flicker in the subsequent images. The flicker is also apparent in this luminosity graph, this pink luminosity graph. You can see that the graph is going up and down, very drastically even. So LR Time Lapse has this visual deflicker tool which can be applied, and I'm going to apply to 30 subsequent images. So what is happening over here is the pink graph is the actual luminance of the images and is going up and down, and the green line is what it will try to do. That means it will try to solve the brightness values. You can see that the orange graph over here will be applied to this pink graph so that it can be moved to this visual deflicker tool. I'm going to save it, and after the XMP values, that means the sidecar values have been updated, the LR time-lapse will again start making a preview of the entire. So again, this will take a lot of time, and I will shift to processing and then come back to LR time-lapse when the visual preview. I'm going to check if there are any questions in the chat at this moment. Okay, there's a discussion about Dorje's images. Today morning, Dorje has published on Facebook a spectacular photo of Spituk Kompa with the comet. So let me go on Facebook and show you that image. It's fantastic, really good. It's a single image. Unlike the IAO image, this particular image I think is a single image. So here is the image. This is Spituk Gompa, which is actually very close to his place. He lives just below the Spituk Gompa, and here's the comet. This is really spectacular. What a place to live. His house is just below the Spituk Gompa. Next, I want to talk about a little bit about star trails. What is the role of Adobe Camera Raw in star trails? So I have an example over here, and let me show you the raw files. So here is one raw file in which you can see a lot of stars, and over here at the bottom it's completely black. Let me go back to the bridge, and if I go to the end of this sequence, you will see a mountain. The particular mountain is Trishul. Oh, sorry, do excuse me. This is Panchachuli peak number 2, and the moon was rising from the right, and it was providing light on the snow over here. So you can see lots of stars. And the point that I want to make over here is that when you want to build a star trail image, you would probably want to increase the brightness of the stars quite a lot. So I have examples of sidecar files. Let me go to the particular folder. So here I have two different kind of sidecar files. This set of sidecar file is very bright, and I also have another set of sidecar files which are low in exposure. So here I have raw images, and I'm going to move these sidecar files, just one, copy it into the folder of the raw. So here I have a raw image and the sidecar image. So I'm going to open this image in Photoshop and show you what changes are there. So in this case, the changes that I made, I have increased the exposure by half a setting, plus 0.5, and decrease the highlights and decrease the whites. So if I save all these files, the entire sequence, what will be the result? The result will be, I'm going to show you the result right now. Here is the result of increasing the exposure. I don't think this is a good result because the stars have lost all their color, and this is not a good image. So what is the point that I want to make is that in case you are using Adobe Camera Raw to make a final picture of a star trail, you really need to reduce the exposure. You really need to reduce the exposure. Let me show you again using the other low exposure sidecar file. So here I have Control C, copy it, and I'm going to paste it in the raw. And now I am going to open this particular raw file in Photoshop. And what exactly I want to show you over here is that despite this photograph being really dark, I have decreased the exposure to -1. I have decreased the exposure to -1. So again, the point that I want to make is that in Adobe Camera Raw, if you are trying to build, if you're trying to change, convert the raw files from to JPEGs, you need to reduce the exposure. You need to reduce the exposure. Another example I have lined up to show you. This particular image sequence was shot at Stockholm, Sweden, and this is in the middle of the city. This place is called Stortorget, and on the right you can see the Nobel Museum, and there's a very old fountain on the left, and these buildings are quite famous landmarks of Stockholm. In the sky, you can see very few stars. But you would notice that I have increased the shadows and also the blacks and reduced the highlights, but the exposure hasn't been increased. So you can see that although the sky is devoid of stars, I still haven't increased the exposure. So for the purposes of this webinar, I have saved these images in JPEGs, and I would like to show you when I build these star trails in the software called Stacks, what happens. Let's see. So I have loaded all the files which are from the same sequence, and still you cannot see anything in the sky. Let us stack and see what happens. So as soon as we start stacking, you see that stars have started to appear in the black sky. So again, back to the point that I was trying to make, that if you click a star trail and try to build the JPEG files in Adobe Camera Raw, there is no need to increase the exposure or no need to increase the brightness of the stars, because the star trail image will get very bad. In this particular image, you can also see that as the subsequent images are being blended, you will see a lot of movement in the lower portion. There was also a car passing through this square, and the lights from that will be spoiling the image, in fact. So the upper portion of the image would remain same with the star trails, but the lower portion of the image can be replaced with one image, so that the lower portion of the image is not cluttered and looks clean. This image was shot in February, and it was extremely cold over there, and me and my wife had gone, and we couldn't bear it for long, and we went back to the hotel, then came out again, then we went back to the hotel to warm ourselves up, and then we could move out only 2-3 times, and then we had to retire for the night. At the moment, let me go back to the LR time lapse. The processing is still being done, 55% complete. So I will come back to this image one more time. I have also received a spectacular image from click by Jimi Lowery, and Akarsh has provided a couple of images, and I'm going to work on this spectacular image of Comet NEOWISE. Akarsh, if you are there, can you tell a little bit about this image?
Sure. You might have heard about Jimi Lowery from reading Sky and Telescope. He's a very accomplished visual observer. But someday he met the famous nightscaper Babak Tafreshi, and he got very inspired to try doing nightscaping. So this is so now that the comet is there, and or last week at least, and it was dark, he went out to shoot the comet every night. He lives in a very dark part of the US. So what you're seeing is the output of a very novice astrophotographer who has put a lot of time and effort and money into it. So it's really amazing to see such good pictures from somebody who has just started. And he wanted to learn processing, and he said he'll watch the videos later. So I'm supplying the images to you. So this was shot with an f.95 lens called by Nikkor called Noct. Am I on the line? I'm sorry, I don't hear any voice.
Is everybody
Yeah.
okay?
Sometimes voice trails off, but able to hear Akarsh's voice.
So is there something I need to repeat? Let me know.
Yeah, I too could hear.
Okay, I was not able to hear the entire thing, but apparently others were able to hear. So that's okay, Akarsh. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry about that.
So finally, I want to not to worry, not to worry. So I would like to work on this image as a final at the end of my presentation. So if I double click on this image, it's not opening in Photoshop. So what do I need to do? This particular image is from a newer camera, and I need to install the newer version of Adobe Camera Raw. So I have it over here with me, and I will quickly install. So you can see over here that I have Camera Raw 12.3.exe file, and for that, to install that, I have to quit all the Adobe applications. So I am going to close the Bridge as well as the Photoshop and install this application. I wonder if LR time lapse will also conflict, but I'm going to it's going to tell me. So this is going to install very quickly. So at the moment, Camera Raw 12.3 is being installed, and all the cameras, all the new cameras and the new lenses that have appeared in the market their profiles and raw handling is being installed. The reason that I did not install this 12.3 in the beginning of my today's webinar is because I wanted to maintain a continuity with the previous week's webinar. You will see just now that the interface of Camera Raw 12.3 is drastically changed. And there are a couple of new things that have come up, one of which is texture. So I see texture as a tool to reduce the noise in our picture. So again, I'm going to start Bridge as well as Photoshop. So Bridge has started, and you will immediately see that there's a change in the color. Previously, the Bridge was showing this a particular image as black and white. And now, as soon as I have installed the new Camera Raw, it is able to detect the color in the image. So clearly, Bridge was not able to handle this particular image from a new camera. So if I double click on this image, it will open in Photoshop in Adobe Camera Raw. So here you are, and this is already a spectacular image. You can see that the tail is very sharp and it's blue in color. So first, I would like to explain a little bit about the interface. You can see that it is drastically changed, and everything has been although controls are same, but the location has changed. So first of all, I would like to work on the lens profile, and the tabs have been changed. Tabs were usually in the previous version, tabs were up over here, side by side, but now they have been moved up and down. So, and now it's called optics. So I'm going to go to the profile and use profile correction and try to reduce the So I had to select the make of the lens to Nikon, and then it selected the particular lens on its own. And you can see that the vignetting and the distortion is removed. But I would still like to decrease the vignetting a little more, and I will work on this slider.
Ajay, that's not the correct lens. The correct lens is Nikon 58mm f.95.
Okay, which lens was it?
58mm f.95. It's a very new lens. I don't know if they have it.
Okay.
58mm
58mm f1 point.
Yes, it's one of the fastest lenses ever made. And if you see, this is something like a 2 or 3 second exposure. That's it.
Oh yeah, 3-second exposure. I can see it over there. Yeah, f0.95. Yeah, yes. I can see in the information right on top. So let me see if this particular
they don't have a profile for it. It's
lens is available.
It's a very recent lens.
Let's
so
check. Let me just go through the list and see if the lens is there. Okay, there is 158mm, but this is 1.4, f1.4. So this is clearly not it. Okay, so the lens is not here at all. So we will have to use the manual. Now in this, the place for the manual sliders have changed, and you have to get the midpoint slider, you have to press another triangle over here. So I'm going to reduce the vignetting, and this is what I wanted to make the change. Means the corners should be well exposed. The next thing that I want to change is the white balance, and I'm going to go to basic, and let's try the auto setting first, which works beautifully. The sky has turned gray, which is what I want. Slight fine tuning of the tint to remove the green and the red. Sorry, to remove the red. And now I also want to get some detail in the foreground. So I will increase the shadow. But I see that there is actually no detail available in the foreground. So I will let it be because it will only increase the um, noise in the lower portion. Then clarity a little bit, and dehaze. Now in this section of the new Camera Raw 12.3, dehaze used to be elsewhere. Now the dehaze has been moved to the basic tab, and there is a new slider for texture. So let's see what this texture does. So you can see that in the background of the image, there's a lot of texture. So either you can increase the texture or you can diffuse the texture. So this is probably a way of working on the noise. So you have now two methods, one in basic as texture, and then you can go to detail also and work on the noise reduction. So just a small change of 30 or maybe 40, and so the noise has gone absolutely away. So this is really a wonderful image. And now what you would like to do finally is work on the color of the tail as well as the comet. Are there any more suggestions at this moment? What would you like to see in this image?
Maybe brush the foreground, but we already covered that. So, you also said you don't like local edits. So there's that.
If you try to increase the detail in the foreground, it's too black, and only the noise will be coming up. So
Okay.
I tried that. It's not working nicely.
Okay.
Any other change you would like to see in this image? So let me go and open this image in Photoshop, so you can see that everything has changed in this interface. The buttons are different, and the processes. Okay, here I would like to work again on the block saturation method to increase the color of the tail. So again, I would repeat the block saturation method. So that's Control A to select all of the image. And Control C to copy, and then press Control V 3 times to paste 3 layers. And the top layer has to be made as luminosity blending, middle layer has to be made as soft light blending, and then merge these 3 layers. And one more time, Control A, C. So top layer is luminosity and middle layer is soft light. So this block method of increasing saturation does not increase the noise in the dark areas. So you can see that the blue of the iron tail has come out nicely, and you can also use uh, the sliders of color balance to make it slightly bluish. There you are. Spectacular image. Wonderful. Any comments and change you would like to see in this image? Let me now shift back to the LR time lapse, and the last operation that we had done was visual deflicker, and so the deflicker has been applied, and the image brightness over successive frames has become smoother. Now, after working all this in LR time lapse, what we need to do is open the images. Let me go to the particular folder. And here are the raw images. So what I will do is open these raw images. Okay, this will take just a few seconds, or maybe I can work from Bridge, which will be faster. So select all the images. And since these are 1561 files, it will take a few moments to open in Photoshop. So we have made all the changes that are required. We have made all the changes that are required to the raw images using the software called LR Time Lapse. And now we just have to open them in Photoshop and convert them. So by the time these files are opening in, okay, they're already open. Just a moment of inactivity here now while I let the images open. Meanwhile, I could go to star stack software and see how our star trails are progressing. So the star trails have finished, and the star trails have come out wonderfully. You can also see some vehicles which have moved in front of the camera. People, although it was very cold, there were very few people, but still, the funny thing was happening over here. There were two cameras which we were managing, and one was facing right towards zenith. Everybody would come and look at the camera and then look up and then wonder, what is this camera doing on its own sitting? So that was a funny thing that happened over here, because it was so cold. Me and Neelam were huddled in the door of this Nobel Museum, so that we were a little warm. And the camera was over here. Everybody would come, look at the camera, look up, and then wondering, what is it clicking? So this is the when you want to build star trails and you want to go via Adobe Camera Raw, then you need to reduce the exposure to have good star trails. That was the point I wanted to make. Okay, finally, in case of time lapse, we have made all the changes to the sidecar files in LR time lapse, and then finally we have to open it in Adobe Camera Raw just for the purposes of converting it. So when the files open in Photoshop over here and now, we'll just have to convert it to JPEG and then start with our making a movie. At the end of my presentation, I would like to show another movie. This movie is when during the lockdown period, my camera was working continuously for 26 hours, starting with just before sunrise. The camera is rotating around the horizon. It was placed on a polari. The polari was pointing towards the zenith and the camera was rotating, keeping the horizon. You can see Venus going down. Okay, so this is probably the end of my presentation. And if there are any questions, I would be happy to take them up. Okay, there's a question by Ritesh. Is there a way to remove Starlink satellite trails? Not in Adobe Camera Raw, but if you do stack your images in a method of averaging, then the Starlink satellite trail can be removed. Akarsh has written texture in my limited understanding. It's a kind of like clarity, but operates on smaller detail. So because noise is small detail, it will suppress if we reduce texture. Well, yes, Akarsh, texture is a new tool which has appeared in Adobe Camera Raw, and I have seen it for the first time, and I will probably get a hang of it after some time. So thank you, everyone. Still waiting for any questions that may be there in your minds.
Ajay, do you plan to do a full online course on this? Like, I know you do workshops for people and you take them to the Himalayas and all of that. But are you, now that there is the lockdown, are you planning to organize any workshops?
These are the workshops I'm doing. Today is one, and I'm doing it several workshops with AAA Delhi. Then Mysore Astronomical Society had approached me for a session on joy of astrophotography. But I am more interested in doing practical workshops, and my next workshop is scheduled for middle of October at a new place of Munchiari, which is very close to the mountains. So if the dates are fixed, location is fixed, and several people have already registered. So if the lockdown goes down and we are able to travel according to the rules, the workshop will go ahead. But otherwise, it will be postponed. So at the moment, I'm more intent on doing practical workshops than online.
Okay, makes sense.
So thank you everyone for attending, and it's a real pleasure. I have also learned a lot of things in Adobe Camera Raw myself while preparing for this presentation, as it always happens. So thank you very much for everyone. Over to you, Vishwanath.
Thanks, Ajay.
Thank you, Ajay.